When the Chiefs came to town, they couldn't move the football. He scored 9 points. When the 49ers came to town, they scored 3 points. If you have an elite quarterback, you're scoring 12 points in those 2 games, please. And nobody talks about it. Like, he's just the first pick overall and everything's going to be fine. Meanwhile, the rest of the draft has fallen out. Like, he's closer to them than he is closer to being the Peyton Mannings or the Warren Moons that you cited.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Stormy Buonantony, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Michael, you got a column up on VSiN.com today. I want to do a little writing spotlight. It's now or never for Trevor Lawrence. And this is a topic I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about, especially this offseason. What inspired you to put this together?
Well, you know, when DraftKings released their win totals, right, and they had Jacksonville at 9.5, I'm thinking, boy, the book sees this the same way I do, that his career, you would have thought, would have taken this huge spike forward, and yet here they are. They've made all these moves in the offseason. They were a playoff team 2 years ago, but they're only at 9.5. I mean, we know the Texans, I know they went to the playoffs, but the Texans are at 10.5. And so for me, it was like, I think it was a story, Stormy, that no one's talking about. And I think it's a big story. I really do. I think it should be the story of the offseason. I know one thing, Doug Peterson knows it's the story of the offseason because either he gets them to play well or he may not be there next year. And so everybody in the league is looking at, like, where did we go wrong with Lawrence? Like, is it him? Is it the offense? What is it? And that's what prompted me to want to write it, because I was a huge, and I write this clearly in the column, I was a huge Lawrence fan coming out. I saw him early in his career, and I thought he was sensational. I thought he was the next Peyton Manning. And then as I watch him now, I fall further and further away from where I think he could go.
Yeah, you had a great quote on that. You said, but like all waiting rooms, my patience is running dangerously thin. And you started off the article talking about perceptions, Michael. You said perceptions can be powerful, often more powerful than the truth. They also prevent us from searching for the truth. And when the perceptions are standing good, no one searches for the truth. So where do you stand on Jacksonville quarterback Trevor Lawrence? And so I'll ask you, Michael, where do you stand on Trevor Lawrence at this point in his career?
I think Trevor Lawrence is a mistake-prone quarterback who doesn't play with any consistency in any part of his game. And Caleb Williams got me on to relooking at him again, because Caleb Williams isn't very consistent either with his mechanics, his fundamentals, his footwork, his ball handling, all those things, right? And Lawrence isn't either. If you watch Lawrence, he may take his footwork, his ability to drive the ball and throw it is not as good. And so I stand in the category of that Peterson's got to change his mindset. Last year, they ranked 30th in the league in yards per attempt rushing. They were 6th in passing attempts. And I explain it in the column. It's hard to call runs that you can't get yards on. And it's hard to call pass plays when your quarterback's turnover prone and makes mistakes. But I think there's got to be a better balance. I think they've got to get the ball to their players that can really, ATN specifically, and try to minimize Lawrence's impact on the game. He's got a little bit of Dak Prescott. I think when he's throwing it 30, 33 times a game, you're going to get yourself in some trouble. You're asking him to do things at the line of scrimmage that I don't think he's really good at doing. I think he has got to be kind of grooved into it and make it very comfortable for him. I think you got to make the offense very easy for him too. I think he is not I'm going to change the protection, I'm going to do this, I'm going to move this around. No. Get up and go run it and make him feel comfortable.
Yeah, you talked a lot about the way that he takes chances with the ball and the mental mistakes, the assumptions he makes with the ball that can hurt his team more than help at times. And yes, he did surpass 4,000 yards this year. He did have 21 touchdowns despite dealing with a number of injuries. But you also look, 14 interceptions, tied for 4th most picks in the league, and an NFL high 21 total turnovers because of all the lost fumbles. I thought this was interesting, Michael. There are only 11 quarterbacks since 1978 that have turned the ball over more in their first 3 seasons. That is a list that includes a couple of Hall of Famers in Warren Moon and Peyton Manning, but it also includes guys like Blake Bortles and Mark Sanchez. So when you have Trevor Lawrence, Where in that spectrum do you think he ultimately lands? Because as we talk about perceptions, he was considered that elite number one overall quarterback. We've talked about generational a lot today. That's how he was perceived.
Yeah.
So what ultimately does he become?
I think he becomes, I don't want to say this, but it becomes a guy who's got to blend in the offense, not carry the offense. The most concerning thing, Stormy, is his accuracy and his inability to get the ball down the field. I think he plays very robotic. I think he plays almost with no flow to his game. And when he does that, he doesn't hold the ball long enough. I mean, think about this. His career best yards per attempt down the field was 7.1 last year. His first year with the great Urban Meyer, he was at 6.0. I get that. I excused him as we sat in the waiting room, blame it all on Urban. The next year with Dougie, he's at 7, and this year's at 7.1. Like, he doesn't get the ball down the field. And his accuracy gets too many balls batted at the line. To go along with the fumbles, he's got 33 balls batted at the line of scrimmage in 2 years. He's a 6'6" quarterback. Like, how is this happening? Because this angle of his delivery, he's careless. He kind of rushes things. I think he plays like a guy that doesn't have 91 career starts. That's what drives me crazy about him. He's got 50 starts in the NFL, and he has another 41 in college football, and yet he plays as if there's no feel to him. There's no rhythm to his game, and that's a concern. And I think, to me, the patience is going to wear thin, especially in Jacksonville, where they're counting on him to lead them. And when DraftKings said Jacksonville's a 9.5, that's you got to bet the over there, they're saying they don't believe it either. They're saying they don't believe it either.
And with that, Michael, bettors have already brought that down where it's open 9.5, but it's down to 8.5 now at this point. They're plus 240 in the AFC South after being an odds-on favorite last year, and the season obviously fell apart. What I did think was interesting going through the schedule last year too, Michael, was they were 8-3 to start the year, obviously fell off a cliff the back end. Trevor Lawrence was dealing with a litany of different injuries and was just off as a player in general. But they only won one game the rest of the way. It was against the Carolina Panthers, a game in which Trevor Lawrence did not play. So the lone game that they won the back end of the season was the C.J. Beathard game. It wasn't even the Trevor Lawrence one. And that's why I hate to use this example because I'm a 49ers fan and keep going back to it. But we talk so much about it's not where you're drafted, but how you play. Like Brock Purdy, obviously Mr. Irrelevant. It's not about where he was drafted, it's where he plays. And it's the same thing just on the opposite end for Trevor.
No question. And the game that they won against Carolina, they ran the ball for 155 yards in that game. But you hit the nail on the head. So one thing you always want to look at a quarterback is what his third down numbers are. This is where J.J. McCarthy has moved himself up in the draft. He's good on third down. Whereas when you look at Trevor Lawrence, the game's moving so fast, he's not good. But where it really worries you the most, Stormy, is on first down. Where that is, Brock Purdy averages 10.3 yards per attempt on first down. Whereas Trevor Lawrence is at 7.3. It's the highest number. He's thrown 18 of his 39 interceptions on second down. Like, this guy just doesn't, there's no down that he's really comfortable within. So you say, well, run a play action pass scheme. Well, he's not great on first down. And they got him in shotgun all the time, and I'm not sure that does them a lot of good. I just think, to me, who have they beaten? I know they beat Buffalo over and overseas, right? I know that was one of their signature wins. But, I mean, when the Chiefs came to town, they couldn't move the football. They scored 9 points. When the 49ers came to town, they scored 3 points. If you have an elite quarterback, you're scoring 12 points in those two games, please. And you have an offensive coach who's supposed to be a quarterback guru, like, where are we going here? And nobody talks about it. Like, he's just the first pick overall and everything's going to be fine. Meanwhile, the rest of the draft has fallen out. Like, he's closer to them than he is closer to being the Peyton Mannings or the Warren Moons that you cited.
Yeah, and I know another thing you talk about in the article is the way that his collegiate career went. 90 touchdowns, 17 picks, 39-3, national championship MVP. And you said past performance is the best indicator of future achievement, but those who believe Lawrence will click are relying on the past from Clemson, not in Jacksonville. And I know he got off to a rough start with Urban Meyer, had a Pro Bowl season after that, although I don't know how much stock we put into that honor these days. And then it fell back off again this season. So you're right, there are a lot of questions about him, and it does feel like it's now or never for Trevor Lawrence because contractually entering the fourth year with a $25 million option waiting after the season, you called it in the article a defining moment.
It is. And when you go back and look at their season, who did they beat that's any good? right? I mean, they got killed by Houston at home in that game, right? When the Houston week 3,
37-17.
They beat the Colts twice. All right, so they came back and beat Houston in Houston, but I think Houston was playing a backup quarterback at that time. I think Stroud was hurt. But who have they beat that's any good? I mean, Cincinnati with the backup. I mean, Cincinnati they scored 31 on Cincinnati. Cincinnati wasn't a good team last year. I just think, to me, it's a little bit of our perception of him and where he stands as opposed to how he's played.
No question about it. Great stuff.